Welcome back to the Hobby Channel. Today we build Tamiya's 135th M13/40 Italian Amato medium tank. Alright, in my What's on the Bench video for this kit, we found that we had 213 molded parts in that familiar Tamiya tan plastic, a beautifully turned aluminum barrel, a tiny photo etched fret, don't panic, we'll get to that, and a set of decals for 3 distinct marking schemes. 2 of those are classic Italian North African options, and 1 for a captured Australian vehicle, which is really cool, but slightly quirky choice. Now, 213 parts might sound like a lot, but here's the secret. Only about 40 of those parts actually make up the main hull and running gear. The rest are all the little details: tools, headlights, stowage, and those gorgeous little twin machine gun mounts that give the M13 its distinctive silhouette. Now, this is a Tamiya kit, so let's jump right in and start building. Like most Tamiya kits, it's pretty straightforward to build, starting with the suspension, the bogies, and the tracks. And here are the bits off the sprue ready for assembly. This tank was loosely based on the interwar British Vickers 6-tonner, with 2 sets of bogie trucks and 8 pairs of small wheels on each side. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room for many beginners: link and length tracks. These can scare newcomers because one crooked link multiplies into a caterpillar that looks like it's been in a fist fight, or worse, it just won't fit. But don't worry, we're going to demystify them. This kit uses more realistic tracks, which are definitely an upgrade from the old vinyl tracks, but require a little bit more finesse. Here's the trick: dry fit every single run of track first. Don't even think about glue yet. What you want to do is start from the drive sprocket, that's the big cog at the front, and gently press the individual links and longer sections together without any glue. Work your way around the road wheels and the idler and let the plastic pieces sit for a couple minutes. Believe it or not, this sets a memory in the plastic. Then you can apply the glue. And I kept it as a top section and a bottom section. I took the 2 halves and I sprayed them with a black primer, and then just using an Armor Brown, which is kind of a rusty color, and through a series of dry brushes, starting with a dull gunmetal and working up to a very light application of aluminum, I highlighted the pieces of the track that the paint would wear off and the rust would wear off. So while the lower hull and the tracks cured, I moved to the upper hull and turret. Following the sequence in the instructions gets the job done quite quickly, especially with the lower part counts. By following Tamiya's sequence, you avoid those too late moments and ensure a smooth, satisfying build. Test fitting parts before gluing, as the instructions often imply, is also a golden rule that will save you from mismatched seams and misaligned components. You'll also find that with this kit, every subsequent part hides a seam or covers a joint or requires access to things you won't have later if you glued things together too early. Here you can see the 2 halves completed, except for all the little fiddly bits like the pioneering tools and headlights. The turret machine gun is the first bit of photo etch to be used. There are no tricky bends for any of these photo etch parts. You just need to carefully file the connection point smooth and use a little super glue to join the metal and the plastic parts together. And from my modifying video series, you can see I've attached the wire steps, the jerry can holders, and the sandbags will come on a little bit later after painting. I pre-painted the interior of the lower hull and the turret with an off-white ivory, and then taped it off and primed the exterior of the lower and upper hulls a light gray. Usually for my armor builds, I start from black, but this time I'm going to be working with lighter desert colors, so I just decided to cut my work time down by starting with a gray primer instead of the black. The first undercoat was a mixture of Iraqi sand and tan earth. This would set the brown sand color the Italians used for North Africa. And after that cured, I came back with some aged white and highlighted the center of each armor panel. Finally, the top coat is a mixture of 50-50 mixture of desert yellow and sand yellow. This was thinned with extra acrylic thinner so that it would be a little more translucent and act more like a filter than a paint. Spraying at a lower pressure with the airbrush I kept the undercoat in play and helped the white make the center of each panel look a little more sun-bleached. Finally, every exterior part got a wash of a highly diluted burnt umber oil wash. Most of this was wiped away with cotton swabs, but it does add definition to all the little detail parts. I think using oil paints as a filter is one of my favorite techniques I've picked up in the last couple of years. Finally, it's time to paint all the details, like the rubber on the wheels, the pioneering tools, the headlights, and all that kind of stuff. And then I came back and glued the two holes together. After the glue had set, I realized I forgot that I wanted to put aircraft identification markings on the tank because it adds another point of interest. What the Italians did was they just took a circle of white paint and painted on the top of the turret, which identified the tank as friendly to access air power. This was achieved pretty simply. I have this flexible plastic circle template that I like to use from time to time, and I just taped off all the other circles except for the one that fit the tank top and sprayed some light aged white through the template. I also decided to add some freehand camouflage stripes, taking some of that olive green and lightening it up with a little white. I mean very little, like a 20-to-1 ratio, or it'll turn into a pastel green. And again, running that low pressure through the airbrush and a very light trigger pull, I laid down some camo using the internet pictures as a loose guide. The last bit of weathering was after the decals were applied and a protecting layer of gloss varnish was over top of them, and it was just a dusting step. I could have used pastel chalk as I've done in the past, but with all the little bits, I didn't want to snap any of them off. So I mixed up a sandy color and diluted it with water until the paint was more water than paint. This gives me the pigments in a slurry, which I just painted all over everything. It looks terrible when applied, but give it some time and it will move into all the nooks and crannies and build up on hard edges like it would in a real dusty environment. Building the base time. I have this plaster rock mold from my N-scale model railroading, and I had an extra rock section, and this is what it looks like. But I needed to build a base first. So I had this wooden block. I glued down some craft foam. I just took foam board, I took the paper off of both sides, cut some sections so that I could build a slight little hill, which I taped off the edges so I could keep that clean. I came back with some joint compound, spackle if you will, and I just lightly coated everything. Once that was completely cured and dried, I added some Vallejo texture paste, beach sand, over top of the areas that were not going to be rock. Once that had fully cured, moved on to the rock face. Now the rocks, I used a combination of inks and alcohol. The alcohol allows the inks to soak into the rock and to stain it, which gives a really nice weathered look. I used the yellow ochre and some sepia, transparent sepia inks in either straight or in different mixtures to kind of give the rock leopard skin plotting, and then just hit everything with a little bit of black just to kind of tie it together. Once everything was painted, I ended up giving everything a very light misting of a light pink color. I know it sounds weird, but pink and brown really work well together, and it kind of makes the desert sand have that brownish, pinkish color that you can see in the North African campaigns. Using tacky glue, it's just a PVA, but it's very tacky. I glued the tank in place, adding some weight to the 1, 2, 3 blocks so that the bogey wheels and the track would kind of sink down into its spot on the sand, so it looks like the vehicle has some weight. And once that was dry, I attached the turret. Decided where I was going to add the crewmen. Obvious one is the driver. He's designed to sit on the hatch and have his hand with the open hatch, so he got sat there. I pushed the sandbag blocks into place and let them set up with the glue. One of the 3D printed guys who's kind of leaning back a little bit, I put him on the top hull with his back towards the turret and his feet on the sandbags. Again, a little bit of tacky glue. It dries clear. The second 3D printed guy, I decided I was going to have him straddle the barrel. And he's kind of sitting there looking at his buddy. They're both having a cigarette. while the gunner is looking over towards the commander, who originally I was going to place him on the rock, and I thought, no, that looks out of place. I just glued him on the defender like he's looking forward. And that's the whole scene. I've got a tired Italian tank crew that's found a nice semi-sheltered place to hunker down, get out of the tank, get out of the heat of the tank, have a cigarette, while the gunner and the commander talk a little bit of strategy of where they're going next. Are they lost? I don't know. Is it time for lunch? Is it time to have a cappuccino? Well, here we are. We started this journey over a month ago with 213 parts in a box. And if you enjoy the build, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you've built this kit and done some of your own improvements or just built it straight out of the box, I would love to hear your experience with building this kit. And as always, just go out and enjoy the hobby.